We are live. Welcome to the Gennev weekly webinar series. I love this time because it's when we get out of our own homes, if you will, and businesses to talk about what other people are doing in, women's health and in menopause and in the second half of life for women. And today I'm just really honored to have Amy Schmidt, Fearlessly Facing 50, join us. So welcome, Amy.
Oh, thanks so much, Jill. I know it's a mouthful, isn't it? I had to run through that several times when I got the name Fearlessly Facing 50. That's a lot of F's.
Yeah, it will. Okay, my first question, and even before you introduce yourself, where did Fearlessly Facing 50 come from? Like, how did it come
I love that.
to be?
Yeah. Well, you know what? It came because all of this really happened about 6 or 7 months before I turned 50. So the fearless part was a word that I love because I look at fearless as being brave. And so fearlessly being brave, facing 50, because, it's a big number. It's out there. I'm 50, and I can remember my mom turning 50 and sitting there and looking at her when I was about 12 and thinking, man, that's old, Mom. She's getting ready for a birthday party, and here I am, 50. So I think the fearlessly facing 50 part for me is really my story. I just decided that I had been, as you'll probably hear along this interview, on a journey like most women, and just had decided I'm going all in. It's, if not now, when? Why not be fearless?
That's great. Well, let's back up then as you marched up to 50. Like, tell us, introduce yourself, first of all, and just explain what you do.
Yeah. Okay. Great question. You know what? I think I'm like many women. We kind of master the art of reinvention. I think that's really what we do. So over the course of the last 27 years, I've been married and married my college sweetheart. I have raised 3 children. Our youngest is 16, so we still have one in the house, but 2 are basically grown and flown. One is a young adult working in New York City. The other one is a sophomore in college. When I look back and I think 27 years ago where I was in news broadcasting and journalism. That was my passion, writing, storytelling, broadcasting. And then as the trajectory of my husband's career started to take off, and I think this is synonymous with a lot of women that were born in, the late 60s, early 70s, a lot of us kind of said, okay, we made the choice I stayed home and started following this trajectory of Tim's career. So in 1997, I stepped away after broadcasting, going into corporate America, and had my daughter. And from there, art of reinvention. You just pick up. We moved a lot of times because Tim's trajectory was about every 2 to 3 years we were moving. So 11 moves, 1 abroad for 6 years, 3 kids later, involved in everything under the sun, like a lot of women. They immersed themselves in their community. I continued to write. I sat on boards. I did all of the stuff that I was doing and enjoying it. But then all of a sudden, we moved back to the United States. I had lost my parents, gone through some health issues myself, and said, you know what? I got to start doing some stuff for me. And so it was a little bit of a pivot. And I just decided it's my time. And I have a voice, and I'm very passionate about, as you'll hear, about women and empowering and encouraging women just to put the fear aside and just to forge ahead. So that's kind of, from broadcasting to writing to community involvement to mom, daughter, wife, all of those things, that's pretty much my story.
Yeah, it's a lot of roles to fill, and
yeah,
and a lot of women are doing the same thing. They're
right.
they're doing it all. One thing I wanted to ask you, when you knew it was time to start doing something for you, was it a moment? Was it over time, and you were just like in this uncomfortable place, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I got to do something for me? Or talk us through what that felt like, and how did you
Yeah.
know?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's through this part of life for women. You look at this journey, and all of a sudden you get to this point, and you're a wife and a mother and a daughter and a sister. But where did Amy go? And I think it really hit me one time when my husband was, getting ready for work, and the kids, I'm getting ready to get him off to school. And he yells to me and he says, hey, Amy, or, hey, Mom, would you grab the dry cleaning, on the way home? No problem. Of course I'll get the dry cleaning. But I'm not your mom, I'm Amy. And you have those moments and you kind of just continue to forge ahead and think, but it was a little bit of a stop me in my tracks moment because I thought, where did Amy go? You lose your identity. So for me, I had lost my parents when we lived in Germany, which was it is a big part of my story, and it's in my book. Lost both of them, and I wasn't able to make it back in time to see either of them, which is really at this age when we're dealing with aging parents and caregiving and things like that. And I was a country away, I was in Germany. That was a challenge for me. When we got back to the US, I had some issues with just anxiety, which was a lot menopause based, perimenopause based, all of those things kind of culminating. But yet I was having all of these conversations with my friends, and we're all talking about the same things: hot flashes, sleepless nights, anxiety, all these things. And I'm thinking, you know what? There needs to be a voice out there advocating and opening the dialogue for women. And that was my moment when I said, I'm going to do this. I'm passionate about it. My network is broad. I have the wonderful friends and community all over the country and world. So why not start sharing this and inspire each other to start talking about things that otherwise we kind of just push to the side?
Mm-hmm. I think that's so inspiring because think that, okay, what I'm experiencing might be something that other women are experiencing. It's
Right.
our native, we naturally think we're the only one, or we're going crazy, or
Yeah.
what's wrong with me? And instead you took that and flipped it and you said, hey, I bet there's other women that are going through this. Talk us through a little bit how, I think that's brave and bold, and thank you. Because
You're
you're
welcome.
touching women, you're reaching them. Talk a little bit about the notion of fear, because it's in your title of Fearlessly Facing 50.
Right.
Talk
Right.
a little bit about that, because I think fear is something we don't want to talk about. It
Right.
makes us appear vulnerable. So it's a
Exactly.
big.
And I think we do all have fears. I mean, we all have them. And at this age, we start fearing things about our health. We start fearing things about our parents falling or not taking medicine, or fearing about relationships that are changing and should we have done something different. So fear is a part of everything. And I think that what we need to do as women, and what I really love, is that we've all got this confidence that's just kind of hidden under these layers because we've been doing so many things and so many experiences, and we just keep it all going. That's just what women do. We master the art of reinvention and multitasking. And so, you just have to overcome your fear by honoring your confidence and finding that again, finding that voice, and realizing that this beautiful piece of art that you've created, this masterpiece of all of these things along your journey, all fit together. And you have an incredible story to share. And I think that's where women get stopped because they think, oh, I wish I looked like I did 20 years ago. Wow, I wish I still had that, that heart aflutter with my husband that I don't have as much anymore because everything's changed. Or I wish I could still ski the Black Diamonds without, worrying that I'm going to need a knee replacement or something because, that's where we are. We have those fears, but we can't allow them to stop us. We just have to continue to make a plan to forge ahead. And I think women just need to switch that lens a little bit instead of looking back with that Norman Rockwell-ish, memories of things in the past and the kids with the sweaters that matched and everything else, is to shift that to living and looking forward and all that you can accomplish and do, whether it's enrolling back in school if you haven't finished. I've met some incredible women that have just taken on these journeys, these new leaps of faith, and said, you know what, I'm just going to do it. Volunteer for an organization, write a book, start a podcast, all of those things you can do. So that's kind of where it all comes from. So it's everybody's fearful of things, and we have a tendency to do that to ourselves. We get so fearful of not having it perfect or waiting for everything to be perfect that we just can't do that. We just can't wait. We just got to jump in. And my book is called Cannonball, and I'm a big believer in just cannonballing off and making this huge splash. That's what we have to do.
Well, let's talk about that, because you started when you decided, hey, I'm going to bring my story to life. I'm going to start reaching other women and building this community of women like me. You started with a podcast, and your community and your following has grown, and so there's a hunger for the message that you're bringing, and it's culminated very soon in your first book that you're publishing. And so I want to talk about Cannonball. I love the title. But it's my favorite swimming move.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
talk about where you started and why podcasting? Because you obviously leaned into your publishing or your media background or your
Right.
newscaster background.
Right, it did. And I do look at that as all little pieces of the puzzle for me. It's all allowed me to have more confidence in doing this. So, 6 months before I turned 50, I said, you know what? I'm having these conversations, like I said, with women. We're all sharing this common thread. We just need to start talking about this stuff. We need to start talking about menopause. I never talked about it with my mom. We never had those conversations. And so I put in a local Facebook community group. I said, you know what? Anybody know how to start a podcast? Because I really had no idea. Was it a button on your computer? Who knows? I wasn't even really an avid podcast listener at that point, and this wasn't that long ago, and podcasts have been around forever. And so a really nice young guy, I could be his mom, came over and sat down with me in my office and said, okay, Mrs. Schmidt, tell me what you want to do. And I said, well, first of all, you can call me Amy. And next, you know what? I want you to show me what I need to get. But I want to do it. I want to be this embrace this lifetime learning, which I think we need to do as women. I want to do it. Soup to nuts. Show me what to do. So he added things to my Amazon cart. I became an Amazon affiliate. He set me up to do that too. I had no idea. And, many trips to Google, to the Genius Bar at Apple. And, they'd be like, hey, Amy, what are you working on now? And putting together this podcast. And so for me, the interview part of the podcast is very easy because that's just part of kind of my wiring, I think. I'm a conversationalist by nature, so that's very easy. But, the technical part of it, editing and producing and all of that, it's all self-taught. I learned it. This young guy came in and kind of helped me set some things up, but I do it all soup to nuts. So it just shows that you don't have to be technologically crazy savvy to start something like this. And so I pride myself in that part of my story because it wasn't perfect. It still isn't perfect. And I can still remember that day when I pushed the record button and just went for it. Took a deep breath and just said, I'm just going for it. And with that, it's just been incredible. And I think a true testament to the message that needs to get out there to women. Women thrive on community. They thrive on connection and conversation. And this podcast is just, I love to share these stories of these incredible women doing amazing things like yourself, just incredible. It makes you your paths just cross with such inspiring women. You just want to keep going. You crave it.
It feeds you.
Yes.
It feeds you. To pause for 1 second, for if anyone's just tuning in, we're live on Facebook and we're also obviously recording the webinar through Zoom. This is the Gennev Weekly Webinar Series, but this is a special edition one. We had an opportunity to bring Amy Schmidt of Fearlessly Facing 50 on with us today. She's got a new book coming out that we're going to talk about next. But I just wanted to preface Gennev Weekly Podcast. I'm Jill Angelo. I'm the CEO and founder of Gennev. And again, I'm thrilled to have Amy here. Talking a little bit about your podcast and bringing stories to light and it fulfilling you, how do you pick the women that you talk to on your podcast? And what do you hope their stories bring to your listeners?
I love that, and at first it was really just utilizing my network. And I think that's something that women sometimes stand back and say. I talk to women all the time and they say, oh, Amy, I don't have a network. I'm not a business person. I don't have a network. You do have a network. And I think my first guests were people that have been a part of my life, inspired me in different ways along my journey. And so I said, hey, would you be a guest? From there, it's kind of culminated into women reaching out to me and saying, hey, I have an incredible story. I would love to share it. And my podcast is kind of a 3-pronged approach. So I share these inspiring stories of women doing crazy cool things. And then I have experts that come on and talk about top of mind topics like menopause, women's health, anything, aging parents. And then I have celebrities as well that come on and share their journey, which is just incredible. But the women, my whole objective with my podcast, and when I sign off every time, I just take a deep breath and say, I hope that it inspired somebody to take action, because that's what it's about. If something in there resonated, and I get so much, it just feeds me in such a way. And I learned so much from each podcast. I had a wonderful guest on one of my first podcasts, a young woman who is now probably 51, and her son at 17 had a massive stroke and ended up being in a state of locked-in syndrome, which means he can only move his eyes. He cannot walk. He cannot talk. He was in a Division I, signed University of or Mercer College to play Division I lacrosse. And here's a woman who I know through another friend, so utilizing my network. And I reached out to her, and you can just hear in the podcast sharing her story. One was so brave, but it also touched the heart of so many people listening. She got reach outs from women all around the world that said, wow, I'm a caregiver for my child, or I'm 50 and going through this. And that's the power of the podcast for me, and that's really how I find my stories. I do a lot of research, of course, but there's just so many women that have incredible journeys to share.
It's amazing, and even that she would come and share that.
Yes.
I'm sure in a way for her, it's part of the healing process too.
Right.
We've got to talk.
Yeah.
What, as you've been doing Fearlessly Facing 50 podcast series for how long now?
I started in October, was my first podcast. I really launched Fearlessly Facing 50 in my company back in, I guess it was about June or July, but the podcast button actually was like mid to late October. So yeah, pretty cool.
That's amazing. And through that, you have been on this journey of creating a book, Cannonball. Yes. Tell us a little bit about the book, first of all. It's coming out very soon, correct?
Yes,
so
it is.
Talk a little bit about the book, and then I want to know, what was your journey? When did you say, I need to start writing this down or capturing it, and we need to publish this?
Yeah. Okay. Well, Cannonball is I love the title too. And my publisher in New York City, we've had to do everything by Zoom now, which has been, for our first book, has been challenging, but so much fun. I was a competitive swimmer all my life. That was my identity, swimming up and down and following a black line from, early 6-year-old. I think I won the cutest swimsuit in the 6 and under all the way through college. That was me. Searching for validation in a lot of ways, which I've uncovered through writing this book. But Cannonball for me is a visual. And when I talk to women, I have them just take a deep breath and close their eyes. And I say, okay, I want you to picture 2 diving boards, one low board and one high board. And standing on the low diving board is a woman in her early 30s, pretty well put together, has a tattoo on her wrist that she doesn't remember where she got it because it was a fun girls weekend, and she's got little kids, and she's in a bikini, and she's ready to go to the end of the diving board, but she just can't quite get there. She's worried. The lifeguard keeps saying, come on, just go. And she just can't go. She's nervous. And then you kind of look at this high dive, which, back in the day, there used to be high dives. Now I don't think they have them anymore because of insurance, but the high dive, I picture myself climbing all the way up to the top, not stopping, not skipping a rung, just going all the way to the top and just running and cannonballing off. And it's not going to be pretty. I say in the book, it's probably you're going to start ugly. It's going to be uncomfortable. You might need some type of chiropractor appointment afterwards, but you're going to cannonball off and make this huge splash. And everybody's going to be looking at you, and it doesn't matter because you have that confidence. So Cannonball for me is my story combined with women's stories, inspiring stories that I have run across in my journey, and share them as well. And then at the end of each chapter are strategies and reflections that you can apply to your life so that you can find that confidence to just cannonball off and just, go forward.
I love that. And before we start taking some questions, when is the book expected to come out?
May 19th is what we're shooting for. Yeah, the interior design is going right now, and it'll be available on Amazon. It'll be available in bookstores too, but Amazon will be the way to get it now. So, and I think we're going to give away a copy on this, which would be great.
Well, and we grabbed, I think, one of the exercises that you've got in the book. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later,
good.
Just from your Instagram feed. So, well, good. Well, first of all, I want to invite people to ask questions. We will make this a fluid conversation. I know I've kind of been drilling Amy with my questions, but from time to time, we'll certainly take your questions. So please, via the chat or via hand raise, you can submit questions either way. We do have a question that I'd like to take now from Debbie. And Amy, this is for you. Conducting a job search over 50 can be so confidence defeating, as age discrimination is a real thing. What are some confidence builders you would recommend for the well-seasoned job seeker?
That's a great question. And I would love for this person to reach out to the podcast and go ahead and search Fearlessly Facing 50 podcast, because 2 weeks ago I had on Lori Knutson, who talked about this very thing. And it's a 2-part series. The first part dropped, and it's all about finding that confidence and selling yourself in your resume and building your resume. And I think one of the pearls that I've learned from this and, reapplying in the job force and things is that women, we second guess ourselves right off the bat. We look at the job qualifications and we say, "Ooh, I can do that. Not that. Oh, shoot. Nope." And then they just say, "I'm not going to submit my resume. I'm just not even going to do it." So I always say in my book, I said something about your finger hovers over the send button because you just don't think you've reached all those qualifications. Whereas men will look at it, and even if they don't have the qualifications, they submit it. So it's that difference. So I just encourage you to put together your story of all that you've accomplished and what you've done, and then talk to somebody like Lori, who's a career specialist, that can kind of put that in a way in your resume, because resumes are different now as we get older. There's certain things that you do put on there, and there's certain things you don't, and then just go for it. What's the worst case scenario is kind of how I go through life. What's the worst case scenario? You learn from the experience. Even if you don't get the interview or the job, you've still accomplished so much just in pushing send.
Yeah. And I think even to add on to that, is stay authentic to who you are.
Right.
If you're worried about appearing old, lean into that wisdom. You have experience that a younger 30-something or 20-something won't have. I was on just a happy hour webinar with another community the other day, and one individual in particular was talking. He was in his late 50s. He had worked at Airbnb, and he said, all my colleagues, in fact, my boss was not even 30. And he said, I said to my boss one day, or my manager, like, I'm not contributing in the same way. And the younger individual, which I thought was kind of insightful for a 20-something, kind of said, I hired you for your wisdom, not, your tech or digital savvy or your startup savvy. I hired you for your wisdom. And I think too often we undermine the wisdom that we carry. And I think to even see it, like you said, even consulting with Lori, or even with a man that you might trust, if you articulated your accomplishments, to a guy, I bet they could pitch it in such a way that you'd be like, whoa, I'm all that, So
right.
Just to add to your comments, I think we undersell wisdom, and use somebody else to help kind of pitch that back to you.
Yes, use your resources. I agree, 100%.
Do you, Amy, in the conversations that you go through, do you see trends? Like, is it a lot of looking for jobs? Is it restarting careers? Is it dealing with anxiety? Is it dealing with divorce? Like, are there certain amongst your community that you see time and again, or is it a huge diverse kind of set of challenges and opportunities?
Great question. It's a lot of what you said. It's a lot of re-entering the workforce, but it's also, I recently had a roundtable with a group of women that have been with the same company for 25 and 30 years. And, they're worried that all of a sudden they're going to go in and they're being downsized, or you get those words, "I'm sorry, you're not going to be in this position anymore. We can offer you this," but it's that whole shift. So I see a lot around career, a lot around fear of getting back out in the career and feeling outdated around technology. I see that a lot. There's a trend around women thinking, "Oh, I don't know about social media. It makes me too nervous." But yet then we become antisocial, and we actually need that connection. So some things around technology, a lot around relationships, whether it be with your spouse or partner, whether it be with your adult children, your parents. I see a lot around relationship changes, and just embracing those changes and realizing that it's all very normal. And silver divorces, that's something we have coming up on our show. It's very common. We have a lot of health issues. We have a lot of menopausal issues, a lot of questions about hormones, and all those types of things that we deal with as women. So it's very multifaceted. And I think that's why the conversations around midlife and beyond are so important because they are so multifaceted. They really are. It's driven by so many different things.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this next question, we just got another one in, kind of takes us back to the title of this webinar around creativity and confidence and menopause, and during this kind of menopause time of life. And this individual, Jennifer, says, Amy, how do you think we could use this COVID situation to help grow our confidence and creativity?
Wow, Jennifer, that is a great question. I think it's searching within yourself. And I think, women tend to kind of put themselves on the back burner. And now with this COVID situation, you might be navigating completely differently with a house full of adult kids again, like I have. And then there's that whole new level of stress. And sometimes you tend to put yourself on the back burner. So I think making yourself a priority again is really what we can do at this time. Use this time to, use the time, because I am looking at this as a bit of a gift of time that we never have. And when we fast forward 6 months, we're going to crave this time when we're back to our originally scheduled programming. So use this time to kind of turn that lens inward and say, what is it, Jennifer, that I really want to do? Where can I really add value? And then take those steps on that journey. It's something, it can be a real time for self-discovery.
That's great. I even saw a post yesterday around what things we don't want to go back to normal. And I thought that was kind of an interesting way to think about how can you use what's happening that you actually like right now to become your new normal, coming through this scenario.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing because, when do you ever have dinners with your kids and your family all sitting around the table? I mean, those are things that we will crave at times. So just take each day and look at it as a new opportunity.
Do you think that as you cross that 50-year-old threshold, your obviously your confidence, you've talked about the bravery and the confidence that you've had to just like hit that button for the first podcast or what, just do it. But how about your creativity? Have you felt that it's gone up or changed as the older you get?
Yeah, I think so. You take more risks around it, because there's always going to be judges. So it doesn't matter. Even with writing my book, I mean, I have started this book, Jill. I can't tell you how many times. I mean, I really have. I've started and stopped it because of fear getting in the way of me not being confident with thinking people were going to read it or thinking it was going to add value. So my creativity has really, really grown, and I'm want to learn different things. Like I really am embracing this lifetime learning, maybe because I have a little bit more time. My kids are older. I have a little bit more time. I have a great relationship with my spouse who's able to say, you know what, pursue that, honey, pursue that passion. So I feel very lucky that way. But I do feel like, it is a time to be creative and really reflect inward and find out where your gifts are, because everybody has them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How about for the woman who feels like she doesn't have as much time? Are there suggestions you have for allowing your inner creative to come out or to explore or seek that out?
Yeah, I think it's just really taking that time again to really self-reflect and find where your passions are, whether it's enrolling in a class. Maybe you've always wanted to take that art class. I mean, I talk to so many women, and that is a common thread. I've always wanted to take a watercolor class, or I've always wanted to learn how to take, wonderful photographs, all of those things. So you have to just, even if you're busy, take that time, make it a priority, and put it on your list of things you want to accomplish. You don't have to have a massive, huge list. Have one thing and set 3 little goals to get there every day, and then you'll accomplish it. I think there's a lot of ways we can do that.
Yeah. One thing that we saw you posted, I think, and it's called Reflections on Accepting Your Imperfections. This is something I think, I don't know if this is a chapter in your book. I know you've highlighted Cannonball at the end, but can you talk a little bit about reflections on accepting your imperfections? And you even offer like a little exercise on how to think about it. But I love that notion around accepting what you perceive as your imperfections.
Yeah, I did develop this slide, and it'll be a portion of, actually a portion in chapter 1 that talks about what women really struggle with is waiting for everything to be perfect. and having that fear of it not being perfect. But, nobody else is going to realize that. We're our worst inner critic. So I love this little exercise because it is being self-reflective. It's saying, what are 3 things that, maybe it's a character trait that you don't think represents your best self, or a behavior you want to change, or a habit you've tried to kick. Think about those and don't judge it. I always say that. Don't judge yourself. Nothing, in college when we used to be, everything was graded on a curve. Nothing is graded. Don't judge yourself. Just write them down. And then identify 3 ways in which you're going to improve those those imperfections, because there are little steps that you can take to do that. And I think we have to recognize that nobody's perfect, but that's okay. That's just a part of life. And once we accept that and we work on it, magic happens.
I always have to go back to, and for those of you who are viewing this, I know we'll make this on demand after, both in video and in audio and podcast. We're displaying kind of this slide in this exercise in the book that Amy pulled together around reflecting upon and accepting your imperfections. Amy, was there, is this like a trickle down effect where you're like, okay, I'm not great at time management. Okay, I just accept that. Okay, I'm going to do these things to try to improve it. And then you find another one, or is it like, what if you feel overwhelmed in the amount of imperfections that you have and you just kind of don't know where to start?
Oh gosh, I hope nobody gets to that point, but I know it's easy to do. No, I'm going to limit it to 3 and that's it. And really think about it. We don't have that many imperfections. We really don't. But if there's little things you want to work on, and I'm sure there are a few, limit it to 3, and then 3 ways you can improve it. That's all you have to do. It doesn't have to be one. And if you can't come up with any, that's fine too. And maybe you just feel there aren't any imperfections, and that's normal. That's all right. But your imperfections, don't be too hard on yourself. We are our worst critic. And you think about it every day when you look in the mirror. What's the first thing a woman says now? It's like, oh my gosh, my roots, you can't get your hair done. You can't, and I don't think men never look at it that way. I just dropped a podcast today about getting your sexy back and during quarantine, because it's really hard to stay connected to your spouse or partner because you're just not feeling sexy. And I asked, it was a husband and wife I interviewed, and I said to the husband, I said, you just get up, shave, put your clothes on, and there's really no difference. And he said, yeah, pretty much. It's pretty much the same. Whereas women, it's a real struggle right now when we're not feeling as sexy. So don't be hard on yourself. Don't judge yourself too much. But, I hope that's a good answer to that question. I hope people aren't struggling with too many imperfections, but I do think that it is a good idea just to recognize a few.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. One thing I've even noticed, I was on just a happy hour, webinar happy hour, or a Zoom happy hour, which I think a lot of us have probably overdosed on during a quarantine, is, even people took turns like showing their roots, and it was just like this moment of human, and we laughed. Yes. And it was great because everyone's in the same boat.
Right. Can't change it. Yeah, exactly.
I want to remind listeners that we are taking questions. So if you have questions, go ahead and submit them in the chat, and we'll keep the conversation going. But please submit your questions if you have any. Amy, another question that I had around, just when you think about, now as your audience continues to grow, you're in a place of leadership and accountability to these women. How do you deal with that new accountability and burden in a good way, but it's a huge accountability to create a community of women like you've created?
It is. And I think, I had that question recently on an interview, and they said, how do you get the people for your interviews? And how do you talk to somebody like Joan London? And how does that happen? And I think for me, it is so true, because now I am in this role where women are looking to me for messages that are inspiring them. And that's so empowering for myself. I think that it's really building trust. And I feel I am very much the real deal. I know, you're not sitting next to me in a room, but most people that I interact with will say, I am that girl that doesn't like small talk, that really digs in deep and gets in those conversations. And it's a gift that I've been given, and it really is. And I'm utilizing that. I really feel like there's this level of trust between my followers, my listeners, and myself. And I really value that. And there's been circumstances where certain people have come and said, hey, we would love to do this sponsor, we would love to do this. And it doesn't align with my mission. So I feel very strongly about staying true to that, because that's what I'm about. My story, and hoping that will, empower others that are listening and following me, and then taking their advice as well, because we all learn from each other. And I think it's very interactive. Building a community is a challenging job, but it has so many benefits for not only the leader, but for the members as well. It's an all-in-one. It's great.
What is your mission?
My mission really is just to encourage women at midlife and beyond, just to put their fear aside, to just uncover those layers until they find their confidence again. Because I think a lot of people lose it. I think a lot of women lose it. I want them to find their identity, no matter what it is. Everybody's circumstances are different. Everybody's story is different. No two are the same. And just forge ahead and look at midlife not as a crisis, like the first word that drops down when you Google midlife. Look at it as an enlightenment, as a time that you can just experience something new. Take on a new challenge, maybe finish your degree, maybe enroll in an art class, maybe volunteer for an organization that you've wanted to but haven't had time. It can be as little or grandiose as you want it to be, but it's all about finding your confidence.
What is it about midlife that that hits our confidence? Because it's something as well at Gennev. We often, because we're so focused on menopause and more a lot of the healthcare side of it, but also the social. But one of our early reasons why we started Gennev was really focused on midlife is this point where you're on either a career trajectory or you are independent from your kids. You're like coming up to the peak of something in your life, and yet whether it's menopausal symptoms around anxiety or can't sleep or brain fog. So there's physical aspects of hitting your confidence. But are there other things, like what do you see in terms of really hitting the confidence at midlife?
Yeah, I think the menopausal, all of those symptoms around what we experience, the expanding waistlines, the leaky bladders, all of those things that we experience as women definitely just make you feel like, oh, really? It's like puberty. There's a beginning, an end, a middle. You're going to get through it. Every woman goes through it. But the physical parts of menopause are difficult. The emotional parts are equally as difficult, because you do all of a sudden have this onset. I did, and I talk about it in my book, of anxiety. I never really had anxiety before. And all of a sudden it just kind of came out, and trying to balance that and figure that out, and being uncertain and not being able to open the dialogue up, being afraid to talk about that, thinking, oh, my friends are going to say I'm crazy, or, that type of thing. So all of those emotional parts. And then you also look at just your role, your identity is completely changing. You're completely needed differently. As a wife, you're needed differently. As a mom, you're needed completely differently. As a wife, everything changes. You get these points in your life when you're dealing with aging parents. I saw it with mine. That's a challenge. And then you just take it a little bit lower, and that's a challenge with your siblings and your relationships and dealing with your parents. So there's so many facets that I think that's why this part of life is so challenging, because it's easy to get stopped and stuck. It really is. It's easy to get stuck in there, but you just have to keep going.
We had a question come in, and this one is near and dear to my heart because I get caught up in this all the time. But it's, how do I stop comparing myself to women who are so much more accomplished than I am?
Oh boy.
And even falling into that comparison game, just to elaborate, I know my own, social media is the worst. I see how other entrepreneurs are posting about their businesses or, accomplishments. And I'm just like, you go into this comparison place. It's a dangerous spot.
Oh, absolutely. Comparison is the thief of joy, right? I think Rachel Hollis says that. It really is. And it is. And it's social media driven by a lot of it, because if we took that out of it, we wouldn't have as much of that. But there is such a focus on, fitness around women and looking a certain way and images and all of those things that we have to deal with. And we've dealt with it since middle school, for Pete's sake. Women are always judging. And I write about that in my book too, because we just have to forget about that. And just like it says in Cannonball, you just go up there and as uncomfortable as it is, and it might be ugly, It might not be anything that you think it's going to be, and people are going to be looking at you, but it doesn't matter. So we really have to just remember that it's our story. And most of the time, those are filters on Instagram that are taking off 10 pounds or making less wrinkles or whatever. So it's really not reality. But it's hard. It's definitely hard. And those are the times when you just have to kind of step away and get out in nature, go take a hike, go take a walk, go somewhere else, and then come back to it. And you'll have a different perspective.
Yeah, it's amazing what that departure from it does for a person, even a good sleep.
Yes.
All right, we have another question. Do you have strategies that worked for you in initiating those hard conversations around changes that occur during menopause?
Yes. My strategies around that are friend-based. I have to tell you, I've had an incredible support network of friends. And I have a great female physician, which I think is another big part of it. But I think as women, we just need to find our tribe, our women, and talk about these things. And those are really where you develop the best strategies, is through conversations like that and asking questions and finding a great physician. And there's so many out there. I'm sure you see them all the time, Jill, that are really passionate about women's health. And that will answer those tough questions and will dig deep into those conversations. And that's what you need to do. Those are really the strategies. Find a good friend group and a great physician.
That's great. It goes back to, we often say this: menopause starts with a conversation, because it kind of normalizes it when you talk about it, just like the showing of the roots on the happy hour, it normalizes, and then everyone shares, and you're kind of like, oh yeah, it's just part of life, and it doesn't become as daunting.
Right.
That sharing.
Right.
Even from a physician standpoint, I know a lot of our doctors at Gennev have many of them, and the reason why they love working with what we do is they love focusing on women's health and menopause, and it's partly because they're going through it or have gone through it, and they have had their patients with them all the way through. And so it's kind of almost like talking to another person who's experiencing the same thing as you.
Right. Exactly.
A follow-on question to that came in. Does this play a role in your approach to life now? So in terms of, around your, sorry, I'm going to back up. I misread this. What are your thoughts on your responsibility to support women of future generations? And does this play a role in your approach to life now?
Definitely. One of the things I pride myself most in right now as a mom with a 23-year-old daughter is the fact that she's looking at what I'm doing and she's saying, wow, Mom, that's pretty cool. Like you've figured out this technology thing. My boys have encouraged me as well, but having a daughter and kind of seeing her and being able to interact with her now and seeing the conversations that I'm having with women, I hope that she will see the value in friendships and community and conversations and digging into those hard things and finding those support groups that you need and reaching out for help when you need it. That's one of the big goals with my podcast, is having women give permission to themselves to ask for help when they need it and to utilize their resources, because that sometimes we're afraid to do that. So I hope that other generations, older and younger, are watching and saying, you know what, I can still do that at 70. I still have friends. I still have the value of those friendships. Or women that are in their 20s are going to be taking on the challenges of menopause and aging boldly, and that's what we really need to do.
That's great. We have a question that came in from our Facebook Live. Anxiety is keeping this person from being able to look ahead with hope. How do you overcome that?
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. It's a challenge for a lot of people. And I think anxiety is on high right now, just with the uncertainty and our ability to feel out of control. And so, I think around anxiety, there's so many mental health professionals out there that are available to help and resources available. But sometimes just allowing things to unravel. Sometimes anxiety is coming from a position of trying to be in control. And I know I've suffered from that as well, and especially as women, we like to be in a position of power. And we also like with that to have control of things. And so it's very difficult at times when you're feeling anxious to just allow it to unravel. and just kind of let it play out the way it does. And that's a challenge. I'm challenged with it every day. But finding time for yourself, going back to self-care, seeking out a mental health professional if needed. Also, just taking time to meditate or even getting out in nature, I think is so important for anxiety because it allows you to remove yourself from that burden for a bit and just breathe and then come back to it. And maybe you'll view it through a different lens.
I used to put on the top of my calendar every day, remember to be kind. And it was just like this reminder. Do you, even as you were going through your times of anxiety, have something that you said to yourself every day, or mantra comes to mind, or are there ways to manage it by even a recurring message that you share?
Yeah, well, my mantra that I have always said is, I haven't peaked yet, I'm just getting started.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's just been my thing for so long, even before I launched Fearlessly Facing 50. But for that person that's struggling with anxiety right now, just realize that there's so much more to live for and you haven't peaked yet. There's so much more out there waiting for you to experience, and you'll find it. You'll uncover it.
Great. Amy, you've come through a lot and you've been on this crazy journey since last October and launching your podcast and building your community. Any surprises to you in these last, month and a half during the coronavirus or the COVID, or any realizations that are unexpected to you or surprised you during this time?
I think it goes back to my following and the support network that I have of my listeners and my people that engage with me and actually now trust me to answer questions, or we engage in dialogue about that. That's been really eye-opening for me, because it just shows, like I've said so many times during this webinar, is that it's the power of community and feeling connected to somebody. And so those aha moments come often for me now, when all of a sudden somebody will reach out and say, wow, that really resonated with me. And that opens a dialogue. So I think that would be how I feel about that.
That's fantastic. One last call for questions. If we have any questions that people want to submit, please do. One quote that we found, or I found on your Instagram, is, "Your only limit is you. Don't allow fear to get in your way." Mm-hmm. Your only limit is you. Can you talk a little bit about that? I think that's so powerful, because we think everything else is limiting us. Right. In my mind, it takes you out of being a victim to putting you in control, or right. At least in a place of power.
Right. And, it all goes back to, you can't get in your own way. You just can't. I mean, and things are going to unravel the way they unravel, but you have to make a plan. And I recently had Mae Musk on the podcast just last week. She has an Instagram following of 300,000 people, some crazy thing. She's the mom of Elon and 2 other children. And she talked about the power of planning and realizing that women were just resilient. We just, plans may not go the way they go. And there's going to be things that stop us in our track and we're fearful of before then, but don't get in our own way and stop. Just keep going. And I mean, think of how many times you've started something. I mean, like I said, with this book, I started it so many times and I got in my own way. And you can't allow yourself to do that, because then look what would have happened. I wouldn't have been able to experience what I'm experiencing now, or sharing my message with women about, finding their confidence and being able to uncover those layers and find their true gifts. So everything happens for a reason. I know it's an old statement, but it is true. And just don't let your fears inhibit you from moving forward. It's all about living and looking forward at this point in life.
That's great. So Amy, first of all, this has been delightful and
it's been great.
Awesome. Just to, it's like we get a one-on-one conversation with a bunch of friends.
I know, it's awesome.
Around us. What's kind of next? In terms of thinking about next steps, or the book will launch. Do you have future endeavors that you want to continue to build on this notion around fearlessly facing 50?
Yeah, definitely. I do. I look at the next decade as like one of the best decades yet. I really do. Speaking engagements, I'm going to be doing quite a bit of speaking with women's groups and such. And I shouldn't just limit it to women, but I do women navigate to my message. But I won't shy away if there's men. But I'm going to be doing that. I'm going to be doing some workshops. I want to do a big retreat next spring of 2021 is what I'm trying to do, kind of a summit of women leaders. And it'll be a 2-day retreat that talks about building confidence and having different breakout rooms and leaders talking about certain facets of midlife and beyond, which will be great. I'm going to be doing a kind of a Facebook series that's going to be coming up with everything, how it's been slowing down and we've been working from home. We'll probably be launching that more in the fall, but it'll be roundtable discussions around all of the top of mind topics around midlife, interactive conversations with women. And so just continuing on that journey, really, and just getting out there and talking to women and leading workshops and inspiring change, inspiring action.
You know, and I lied when I kind of was saying this was my final question, but what do you, as you take these workshops and these conversations, how do you see its role in the workplace?
I have a couple of women that are good friends of mine that are corporate executives and work in New York City and other big cities around the country. And they've said, I really want you to come in and talk to us about the value that we are adding, even as working women that are working 80 hours a week, 60 hours a week, and very high level jobs. We still need to uncover our confidence in certain ways. And so I'm really looking at partnering with some big organizations and talking to their female employees and kind of strategies around confidence and, not losing your identity, not just being being multifaceted and not just having a single dimension of just being that working executive. So I think that's to come as well.
That's fantastic. Well, I'm a huge fan. We're a huge fan of yours at Gennev. Love what you're doing. We need more of it, especially right now. So just one final reminder to everybody, Amy Schmidt, Fearlessly Facing 50. You can find her on Instagram. Your website is also fearlesslyfacing50.
It is, yeah. Yes.
And the book, Cannonball, launches May 9th.
May 19th.
May 19th.
Yeah,
I pulled you forward 10 days.
I know. It was going to be May 1st. We're just, things got a little bit delayed, but that's okay.
Awesome. And it'll be on Amazon. Yeah. I'm assuming people can go to your website too.
Yes.
We're also going to be giving away a free copy to one of the registrants of this webinar.
Oh, so how awesome.
I'm excited about that. And again, thank you. Thank you again for what you're doing.
You, Jill.
And thanks for joining us today.
You too. It was fabulous. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining. This is recorded. It will be available on demand. So anyone who's registered will receive a link and we'll share it up in social channels as well. So thanks again. Have a great rest of the day, everybody.